Why did one man choose to exterminate an entire people? What kind of hatred justifies gas chambers, death trains, and millions of lives extinguished? This is not an easy story to tell, but it is a story that must be told. Today we delve into one of humanity's darkest chapters, Adolf Hitler's obsession with destroying the Jewish people. Where did this hate originate? How did it spread so quickly? And why did so many follow him? But before we start this chilling story, subscribe to the channel name, e.g. Hidden Stories channel. Then leave a comment and tell us what other dark histories you want us to investigate. Ready? Because what you are about to hear is not always taught in textbooks. How far can one man's hatred truly go? Can one sick idea become state policy and drag an entire continent into the abyss? This is not just the story of a dictator. It is the story of how contempt, ignorance, and indifference can become deadlier weapons than any army. During World War II, the world witnessed absolute horror. Millions of people were persecuted, imprisoned, tortured, and murdered, simply for being who they were. Jews, Roma, communists, people with disabilities, homosexuals, all targeted, all converted into objectives for a machine designed to destroy them mercilessly. But among all the atrocities, one question still shakes humanity. Why did Hitler hate the Jews? That question isn't simple to answer. It wasn't merely a personal whim or an isolated obsession. The anti-Semitism that defined the Nazi regime had far deeper roots. To understand the genocide, we must first understand the man behind the plan and the environment that fueled him. Adolf Hitler was not born hateful. He was just another boy with dreams and frustrations. But something changed. Something dark began to grow inside him when the world shut the door in his face. Not just once, time after time, every rejection, every failure, every humiliation slowly accumulated like burning coals beneath his skin. When Hitler finally found an ideology that made sense of his frustration, it was already too late. But Vienna had other plans. At 18, Hitler left his small hometown in Austria for the imperial capital with a suitcase full of hopes and sketches. But the academy didn't see in him what he saw in himself. He was rejected once, and then again. They told him his paintings lacked academic talent. He was deemed unfit, and without knowing it, they cast the first spark of resentment into the world. Humiliated and directionless, Hitler began to wander through Vienna. He lived in homeless shelters, sold hand-painted postcards to survive, and slept on benches and in libraries. It was a dark, solitary, and silent time. But he wasn't alone. Ideas began to accompany him. Dangerous ideas. He found them in newspapers, pamphlets, and coffeehouse conversations. Nationalism, racism, conspiracy theories. It was all there, floating in the air of a crumbling imperial city, weighed down by its own diversity. Vienna was a cultural melting pot. The Jewish community was numerous and active in the arts, science, and banking. For the most conservative sectors, this was viewed with suspicion, wariness, with hate. And there was Hitler, absorbing it all. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but slowly his personal frustration began to find culprits who had a face, a name, and a religion. Culprits who had nothing to do with his failure as an artist, but who conveniently became the perfect explanation, because hating was easier than accepting that he was simply not good enough. A key figure in this era was Karl Lueger, the mayor of Vienna. Charismatic, skilled, popular, and openly anti-Semitic, Lueger used hatred as an electoral strategy, and it worked. Hitler took notice. Words can move masses, and masses can build empires, or destroy civilizations. Thus, between failed drawings and hate speech, the young dreamer vanished. Something else began to emerge in his place, something harder, darker, because when art dies, fanaticism is often born, and we hadn't even reached the war. Early 20th century Vienna was the beating heart of an empire, but also a breeding ground for tension. Adolf Hitler found himself in the shadows of this magnificent city, with no money, no prestige, no future. But he had time, and he invested that time in observing, reading, and nurturing a new identity, not that of an artist, but of a man who began to see enemies everywhere. In Viennese cafes, where art and literature were once discussed, theories about superior races and global conspiracies were now debated. Racist ideas were not just tolerated, they were applauded. For a disoriented young man like Hitler, this environment was not just seductive, it was revealing. He found a narrative for his failure. It was no longer his lack of talent, it was them. A simple, false, but effective narrative. Hitler consumed the rhetoric of populists like Lueger and writers who peddled pseudoscientific theories about racial purity. This was more than just an ideology, it was a worldview, one in which Hitler saw himself as the future redeemer of Germany, the one who would bring order and purity. And in that mental blueprint, the Jews were the absolute enemy, not just one enemy, the main, eternal enemy. Vienna did not make him a killer, but it educated him. It gave words to his rage. It taught him that organized hatred can be a mass tool. And it showed him that the most dangerous ideas are not born on battlefields. They are born in libraries, cafes, and speeches that no one dares to question. What Hitler absorbed in those streets didn't stay there. He carried it, he refined it, and then he unleashed it upon the world. On June 28, 1914, a bullet fired in Sarajevo lit the fuse that would ignite Europe. World War I was about to begin, and a young, broke, directionless Adolf Hitler saw an opportunity in the conflict. He could finally serve a cause greater than himself. He could finally belong. He volunteered for the German army, not the Austrian. He was assigned as a dispatch runner on the Western Front, an extremely dangerous task. He was wounded, decorated, and scarred forever. But it wasn't the gunpowder that left the deepest scar. It was the end. When Germany signed the armistice in 1918, Hitler could not understand it. How had they lost? At the front, the soldiers were still resisting. It didn't look like a military defeat. Therefore, it had to have been something else, a betrayal. Thus was born one of the century's most dangerous myths, the stab in the back, a conspiracy theory claiming Germany had not been defeated by external enemies, but by internal ones, Jews, communists, and traitors within the country itself. It was an unsubstantiated idea, but it resonated powerfully in a humiliated and desperate nation. The defeat was not only military, but psychological. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed brutal conditions: loss of territory, enormous economic reparations, public humiliation. For Hitler, this was intolerable. He could not accept that his country, which he loved with a near-religious fervor, was treated as a pariah. And so, as he had learned in Vienna, he sought culprits, and he found them. again. The Jews were, in his view, responsible for the moral decadence, economic bankruptcy, and social disunity, a perfect narrative for a country seeking easy answers. The frustrated young man who once wanted to paint landscapes now started painting enemies, but this time not on canvas, but in the minds of an entire nation. The trauma of defeat didn't create Hitler, but it gave him his cause. And his cause needed a clear enemy, one that could focus all the hatred, all the rage, all the frustration of a devastated people. And for Hitler, that enemy had a name, a face, and a religion. While Germany tried to rise from its ruins, a new threat was germinating within. It wasn't an army, it was an idea. And that idea already had a face, a voice, and a plan. Section 4. The Rise to Power and the Law of Hate, Germany, 1920s. A devastated, ruined country, stripped of pride and direction. Inflation turned banknotes into useless paper. In that chaos, one man's message began to echo. His name was Adolf Hitler. His speeches contained everything a desperate people wanted to hear: external blame, promises of greatness, and a clear enemy. In 1919, he joined a small ultra-nationalist group, which he transformed into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. No one took him seriously at first, but his capacity for public speaking was something else. At every rally, his voice ignited the attendees' dormant passions. His rage was contagious, his oratory hypnotic. He quickly rose within the party. Hitler didn't invent antisemitism, but he refined it, institutionalized it, and turned it into a strategy for power. In 1925, he published Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a manifesto of hatred disguised as ideology. There, he made it clear that Germany would only be saved by authoritarian leadership, the eradication of the Jews, and the conquest of new territories, the famous Lebensraum, or living space. But books were not enough. Spectacle was needed. Nazism became a visual machine. Torchlight parades, red banners, massive hymns. Every Nazi act was a choreography of fanaticism, and the people, starved for identity, applauded. Hitler promised order and jobs, but in exchange he demanded one thing: blind obedience, and a new common enemy. In 1933, he was named Chancellor. That same year, he set fire to the parliament and blamed the communists. He then eliminated freedoms, outlawed opposition parties. In 1934, he proclaimed himself Führer. The state became his reflection. The rise of Nazism was not an accident. It was a slow, systematic, and carefully designed process to transform hatred into power. And it succeeded. Hitler did not just conquer Germany, he conquered its fears, its frustrations, and its very soul. And the worst was yet to come. The war ended. The guns fell silent. Cities began to rebuild. But for millions, the horror was just beginning, because the end of the Third Reich did not bring immediate relief. It brought a new form of suffering, that of the survivor. The camps were liberated by Allied forces. What they found there exceeded all imagination. Men, women, and children reduced to shadows of their former selves. But even after liberation, there was nowhere to go back to. Many Jewish communities had been completely annihilated. Houses were gone, families too. Hundreds of thousands of Jews ended up in refugee camps. A brutal irony, from Nazi captivity to waiting in makeshift barracks, stateless and uncertain. Most survivors sought a single word: home, and for many, that home was called Palestine and later, Israel. The Holocaust also left invisible wounds on language, culture, and identity. Before the war, Yiddish was spoken by over 11 million people. After the Holocaust, its echo was silenced. In the religious realm, the tragedy was an earthquake. How does one continue to believe in a just God after Auschwitz? A new theology emerged, of silence, of mourning, of spiritual rebellion. No one emerged unscathed. Literature and art also sought answers. Testimonies by Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, and Viktor Frankl attempted to put into words what seemed impossible to narrate. Years later, museums, memorials, and institutions emerged. Memory became a political, educational, and ethical act, not to revive the pain, but to prevent it from recurring. Because the Holocaust did not end in 1945, it continues to resonate every time hatred finds a new disguise, every time intolerance raises its voice again. And that is why remembering is not an option. It is a duty. Never again. 2 words repeated in museums, memorials, and speeches. 2 words that have become a mantra, a promise, a warning. But is repetition enough? The Holocaust was more than a crime. It was a moral abyss. It did not happen in secret. It happened in plain sight, with public decrees, laws, and perfectly organized officials. It was the complicity of thousands. It was the indifference of millions. That is why remembering is not just recounting what happened. It is understanding how it happened and why. It is asking how a cultured, modern society could turn blind to the horror. It is recognizing the signs: contempt for the different, disinformation, fanaticism, the normalization of hatred. Every time we forget, we open the door for history to repeat itself. The Holocaust is a mirror, one that forces us to look at ourselves and to decide if we are part of the silence or part of the memory. Never again must not be a phrase. It must be a commitment, living, uncomfortable, urgent. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video and are passionate about this type of content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos and can discover more fascinating stories. We'll see you in the next video.